I'm going to call the meeting to order. Can I have roll call, please?
Council Agency Authority members Beatty.
Here.
Mashburn.
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris. Here. Mayor Chair Roulette.
Here. If you can please stand with me for a moment of silence. Councilmember Beatty, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Mr. Assistant City Manager, we have a couple things on the agenda that you'd like to speak on.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, a couple of notes on tonight's agenda before you. First thing I'd like to point out is that yesterday we did send out an amended agenda. The purpose for that amended agenda was to add item 13C to our closed session tonight. And then in keeping with the fact that tonight is considered a special meeting of the City Council as defined by the government code, we are not authorized to offer tonight the business from the floor in order to keep consistency with the Brown Act. So we have removed that from tonight's agenda. And I do realize that at our last council meeting, we did. They're here.
There you go. Start
Okay.
over.
Start all over. All right. Okay, so we did send out an amended agenda yesterday. The purpose for that amended agenda was to add item 13C to our closed session tonight. The second item is because tonight is considered a special meeting of the City Council as defined by the government code. We are not authorized to allow the business from the floor section tonight in keeping with the Brown Act requirements. So I apologize. We did offer that in error at our last meeting, and I apologize. It was an oversight by our part. So I do apologize to the public and to the council for that tonight. One other minor comment that we have for tonight's agenda is that on item 9D, it is presented to you tonight as one resolution for two bargaining groups. We're presenting to you tonight to split that into two separate resolutions, one for each bargaining group. So with that, that includes my revisions to the agenda. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for the agenda with the amendments?
Move to approve with amendments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We'll move to item 4, approval of the minutes. Oh, absolutely.
So just to clarify though, Aaron, that
Hold
folks
on,
still can
hold on.
speak. Oh,
I'm
sorry.
not-
Sorry, we're getting used to the system here. Just to clarify though, so folks can still come up and comment on any of the agendized items, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Item 4, approval of the minutes.
Move approve.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? I see no presentations tonight. Item 6, consent calendar. Anybody from the council would like to remove anything from the consent calendar?
I wanted to pull A, please.
Councilmember Sullivan would like to pull 6A. Anybody from the floor would like to pull 6B? I'll take motion for 6B.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, then we'll go back to 6A, Mr. Sullivan.
So when I was reviewing the agenda with Aaron on 6A, I wanted to see if we can get a little more verbal explanation on this one. Just, it's a very interesting item, and I know lots of people are concerned about speeding in their neighborhoods. So do you mind kind of just walking us through kind of the item and kind of how this process works, namely how you select streets, how kind of just the basics of it, so that the public can kind of understand the process?
Very good. My name is Gwen Owens. I'm with Public Works. Basically, there are streets that have a prima facie speed, and that's on the face of it. And those are local residential streets that have a certain number of household driveways in a certain distance. And so those are automatically 25 miles per hour. You can have school zone streets as 25 miles per hour. Alleys are 15 miles per hour. Central business districts are 25 miles per hour. We don't have to post a speed limit. We don't have to do any speed surveys with that. Anything outside of those streets, if we want to establish a speed limit other than 55 miles per hour, we actually have to do a speed survey. So a speed survey requires us to go out and survey at least 100 vehicles. And then from there, what we do is we determine what the 85th percentile speed is. The 85th percentile speed is the speed that if you have 100 vehicles, the 85th highest vehicle is going. Then we either round it up or round it down to the nearest 5 miles per hour. And then based upon certain situations such as if there's a lot of pedestrian traffic, if there's extenuating circumstances that high collisions, et cetera, then you can round it down 5 miles per hour. And that's set by California vehicle codes and the manual of uniform traffic control devices. So with that, we are required to, every 5 years, certify the street. So we look at it at 5 years, and if nothing has changed, and when we say nothing has changed, the road hasn't been widened, there's not a lot of development, there's nothing different in the land use. For instance, land use hasn't been, you had like a Walmart and it was redeveloped to a housing project, multifamily, then we can actually certify it for up to 7 years. And then we do that again at 7 years. So there are some areas that, because of development, for instance, we have the east side of Leisuretowne, there's a lot of development going on, and also in Southtown, because of that, it affects certain areas. So some of those areas, we do speed surveys more frequently, or if we have a new street that's constructed, after it's been constructed and there's traffic on it from houses and commercial, office, et cetera, then from there we'll do the speed surveys. So basically what you have in front of you is we are, let's see, we've surveyed, we did 16 surveys on 14 different road segments, because sometimes what we have to do is break up the road segments into different areas because the characteristics of the roadways are different in different sections. We have 14 of them that remain the same, 14 of the segments. Vanden from Alamo to Bailey Ann Place went down from 45 miles per hour to 40 miles per hour. Part of that is because there's more development in that area and there's more stuff happening, the parks down there, et cetera, from the last time it was surveyed. And then Redstone, it's a new street and didn't have a speed survey on it. And that's actually why that's being posted now. Because if it doesn't have a speed survey, you're allowed to drive 55. You can't, when I say you're allowed to drive 55, you can't be ticketed. You can be ticketed, but it wouldn't hold up in court. Okay. So the reason why we have to do the speed surveys is that if we don't have a current speed survey, if a police officer actually issues a ticket and somebody disputes it, if you don't have a current speed survey, that will be thrown out. So that's why we go through this process. We have numerous sections that we actually keep track of, and each year, this is like a yearly resolution that we have on just different streets, and it just depends upon when their speed surveys are up. Does that clarify?
That's super helpful, thank you.
Okay.
I knew there was a lot more detail to it, and I just...
Yeah, and there's more minutia of detail that I will not
great.
share with you.
Thank
so.
you.
I'm going to open item 6A up to the floor. If anybody would like to speak on 6A, seeing none, I'll close it. It's just 6A, the one that we,
6A, correct.
okay, yes, sir.
Could I just make a comment on that?
Yes, sir.
Please. And it's just a suggestion that there be another survey done on Vine Street. I'm a resident of Vine Street, and when we first moved there, the speed limit was 25 miles per hour. And there was a speed survey done, and they changed it to 30. It is a narrow street. Within a 1 mile segment of Vine Street, it has yellow reduced signs, one for 15 miles, 2 at 25 miles, and 1 at 20 miles. After that speed was increased to 30, there was a fatal accident where 2 people were killed in the middle of Vine, around the blind turn. And so every time they do have a 25 or a 20 mile or 15 mile sign, then they post another 30 miles, which you can only drive 30 miles safely for about 100 yards before you have another caution sign. I would strongly recommend that street be changed back to 25 miles per hour. It's a very narrow street. It has a lot of turns, and I think that it would be well worth looking into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other, I'll close and entertain motion.
Second.
I got a motion, and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We'll move to item 7, business on the floor. I see none. Item 8, public hearings, none. We'll move to 9A, Mr. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Item 9A is a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement to participate in the Franchise Tax Board City County Business Tax Program. Tonight we have Kim Mazzamia and Shelley Mueller presenting the item.
All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, members of the council. Tonight we have an item where we're requesting authorization for the city to participate in the Franchise Tax Board City County Business Tax Program. Just some background information on the program. So the California Franchise Tax Board created the City Business Tax Program in 2009. It's a reciprocal sharing of information, and what that basically means is that for cities that participate in the program, they're required to share limited tax information from their business license programs. In exchange, the Franchise Tax Board would also share limited tax information with those participating from business tax returns that they receive. The purpose of the program for the Franchise Tax Board would be to identify businesses that haven't filed an income tax return, and then for participating cities and counties, the purpose for them would be to identify business activity that's occurring in their jurisdiction where a business license has not been obtained. The City Business Tax Program in 2016 was expanded to include counties as well, and there are currently over 60 cities that participate. Locally in this area, Walnut Creek is a participant, Vallejo, Oakland, Berkeley. So those are just some examples of cities in our area that participate in the program. There are specific requirements on the data that's provided and also how that data is exchanged between FTB and also with the city. And so on the city side, the city would be required to provide business and owner's name, the address, the federal employee ID number, social security number, and the ownership type. So that would be if it's a corporation, sole proprietor. On the FTB side, in exchange, they would be providing taxpayer name, the address, again, the FEIN or social security number, and then the principal business activity code. So that would be if they're in manufacturing or if they're real estate. There are codes that kind of categorize the different businesses that are out there. I do want to clarify that I think most all of us know the FTB from our personal income tax returns that we have to file annually. And I wanted to clarify that this data that's being exchanged is only related to businesses. And so these are only business-related returns. And additionally, no revenue information is shared. Due to the confidential nature of the data that's being exchanged, if we decided to participate in this program, there are some additional safeguards that FTB requires us to enforce. And so examples of that would be the data can only be accessed by business licensed staff. And so currently we have 3 on staff, including Shelley. So it's 2 staff members and the 1 supervisor over the area. These 3 individuals would be required to complete a CCBT, so that's the City County Business Tax Program. There's a confidentiality statement that they would have to complete, and then they also would have to take part in annual training as well. The data that we receive would have to be destroyed within 3 years of receipt, and then all data is exchanged through the Franchise Tax Board's secure web internet file transfer system, also known as SWIFT. Should this item be accepted and approved tonight, this would be a timeline of the next steps. And so we would send the agreement, the confidentiality statement, resolution, and safeguard questionnaire to the Franchise Tax Board. The city would then take data from its business license software, that limited data, and then submit it to the Franchise Tax Board by June 30th. The Franchise Tax Board would then take that data and then run it through their database to basically do exception reporting to it. So they would take our file compared to the business returns that were submitted for Vacaville, and then that exception information would be submitted to the city by December 31st of 2020. The information is provided for the previous tax year, so using this upcoming year as an example, we would get the information in December of 2020. It would be for the 2019 tax year. Staff would then run this information through our business license software. Again, to find any exceptions, we would compile and evaluate this data. And then the step after that would be to come forward with another presentation to council, bringing our results of our data analysis back, seeking further direction. So the fiscal impact to participate, there is no cost to participate in the program other than the staff time that's involved. There would be potential additional business license tax revenue to the general fund. But more so than that, really the goal of the reason why we want to participate in this program is really to identify those businesses where we need to do further education on our business license process and bring them into compliance. And the recommendation would be by simple motion to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement to participate in the Franchise Tax Board City-County Business Tax Program. That concludes our presentation. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I see no comments right now. I'll open it up to the floor. I see nothing from the floor. I have Councilmember Beatty.
I imagine there's probably not an answer to this, but on slide 3, it says no revenue information is shared. Isn't that the point of sending the data so the tax bureau can determine?
No, it's more so to identify the actual businesses. And so the way it would work from like the city standpoint would be we send the file of our business license information, like who has secured a business license through the city. The Franchise Tax Board, they're running that through their database to see what businesses have submitted a business return. And then when those don't line up, FTB has some information on, okay, who secured a Vacaville business license that hasn't filed a business return, and likewise the information that comes back to the city. We now have information on businesses that have done activity in Vacaville. They've submitted a business return to the Franchise Tax Board, but we don't have any record of them securing a business license. And so the revenue part isn't needed as much as kind of knowing the contact information and the businesses or the individuals that are doing business in our jurisdiction.
But then they're going to send us the revenue information.
No
With
revenue
the tax, they're sending the tax.
They're just sending those. I'm not sure if we can jump back to. Okay. So the information is really, if you go up one more, I'm sorry, back one more. So it's going to be the slide that. So go to the next one. So the Franchise Tax Board, the only information they're going to share with us is the name, the address, the identification number, so Social Security number or the FEIN, and the type of business they're engaged in. And so there is no revenue information that's shared.
But on 4, it says that they're going to be sending tax returns back.
For line 3?
Yes.
So they're looking at tax returns in their database, but then there is no information, like revenue information, that's part of what gets sent to us. They're taking the file that we sent to FTB, and then let's say if there's an ABC store in Vacaville that secured a business license, and when that information is sent to Franchise Tax Board, if the FTB has no federal tax return for ABC store, so like they kind of know on their end that ABC store did business, they have a business license, but they did not file their taxes. And then likewise, kind of using that ABC store example again, if there's an ABC store in Vacaville that filed a business tax return with FTB, but we don't have a business license for it, the information that we would get back is just that there's an ABC store at this address that's engaged in this type of business. And that would be where in the next meeting where we come back, we would kind of know the scope of how many businesses or individuals that we have doing in the city that don't have a business license, and kind of where do we go from there.
Right, and that makes perfect sense to me, thank you. But they're still going to send back the tax returns that will have the revenue information on it.
So it won't be tax returns. It's just it's a text file. So it's basically going to be a file of.
It says data from tax returns.
So it's FTB data from tax returns. So really the data itself is derived from tax returns, but it's not the tax return that's being sent to us.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Harris?
So I think my question is around, small home-based businesses and how it may affect them, and what is the city's approach going to be if we enter into this. And, you have a lot of small business entities that don't understand the complexities of the laws. So how is this information going to be used if we move forward with it when it comes to small home-based businesses?
Sure. So for that part of it, when we actually have the data that we bring back, and in that follow-up presentation, when we're presenting the data and the information that we have, and kind of going forward with the plan to move forward, that's where we would kind of touch on that in more detail. But really, I guess at a high level to explain it, the way we would approach that is really more on an education basis. There's some agencies that really will take the data and they'll go back and look for back taxes, or they would approach these owners and seek payment for previous years. That would not be staff's recommendation. I think the way we view this is more so as an ability or an opportunity to educate. And then based off of kind of the information that we get back, it might be something where we want to look at our ordinance or kind of how we do business or how we have that in Vacaville, and how we need to change that going forward.
All right, thank you.
Can I also add to that? So our home-based businesses, most of them don't make very much money. So we do have reduced fees and exemptions. So sometimes there are no fees for the actual business license for home businesses.
That's great. That's kind of what I'm concerned about because we have, I mean, that's pretty much what our economy is based on, is very small home-based businesses. So thank you.
I'll entertain motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. We'll move to item 9B, Mr. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Item 9B is a resolution approving the Vacaville Recycling and Solid Waste Management Program. Advertising policy. Tonight presenting will be Brian McLean and Samantha Brown from our Public Works Department.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. In 2011, AB 341 was signed into law by former Governor Jerry Brown. AB 341 represents a facet, just a facet, of the state's policy goals in regards to greenhouse gas emissions reductions, GHGs. As this relates to AB 341, 341 mandates a reduction of solid waste going into our landfills via a few processes, recycling, composting, or other source reduction methods. Again, the sole purpose is really wrapped around the state's policy goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The initial steps to comply with AB 341 really came in 2012 when staff started working on the Recology franchise agreement. As you know, that took a whole year to do. And during that time, we had the ability to take the legal mandates of 341 and work them such as we could into the franchise agreement. What came out of that were the blue cart, the blue toter that everyone has now for recyclables, residentials, and then the green tart, the green toter for the organics waste. We've been running that program now since 2012. It's been highly successful in terms of the recycling and source reduction away from the landfills. And so at this point, staff is looking forward to expanding our public recycling into areas of control by the city, public spaces that the city manages and maintains. So before we get to the point of going out and creating a program where we're looking for public space recycling, we needed to develop a policy. A strong policy like we had developed back in 2012 with our city coach transit advertising policy. So working with the city attorney's office, we spent many hours putting together a very solid and clearly defined recycling policy. This policy is very clear in aligning and detailing both permitted and non-permitted advertising. On the permitted advertising category side, there are two primary pieces. The commercial advertising, which relates to the sole purpose to sell products, goods, and services, and then the public service advertising piece, which relates to community, art, cultural, educational, health and safety events, messages, etc. The recycling program, the permitted advertising of the recycling program is intended to promote recycling through the recycling amenities that the permitted ads sit on. And Samantha will tell you a little bit about that forthcoming. Through the recycling program and this subsidized process, we generate a modicum of revenue out of the recycling program, which helps to provide a level of sustainability that allows the Public Works Department to continue to advertise and promote an outreach on the city's recycling efforts. Conversely, on the other side of the coin, the non-permitted advertising, examples are on the screen. False, misleading, or deceptive statements or information, obscene or pornographic materials, statements or information that promote alcohol, tobacco, or cannabis products and or their use, religious and political advertisements. All of these, again, are non-permitted. And again, I want to stress, going back to a base model that has worked, the City Coach transit advertising model. You've seen City Coach running around town with advertising on the buses as well as in our bus shelters. Since 2012, with that advertising policy, which essentially is a mirror of this one here, the recycling policy, it's been highly successful. I've had 0 issues with the advertisements through that program. Very successful. So with the policy developed and legal okay with it, the next step was to essentially go out and try to find a vendor that could help us assist with a public space recycling program. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Samantha Brown, who will talk to you about that.
Great, thank you. Well, as Brian mentioned just a few moments ago, we are at a point in time where we are seeking opportunities to expand our recycling program. And we have a great opportunity here to offer recycling within our city-owned and city-managed public spaces with the help of a company called Creative Outdoor Advertising. And they provide recycling stations as part of a turnkey, no-cost recycling station program. There is an image of it here on our presentation. And what's really unique about their program is that it is completely controlled by the city. So we have sole discretion as to the locations where we install these units, but Creative Outdoor Advertising assumes 100% of the program costs. So that includes the unit itself, the installation, the ongoing maintenance and repair, as well as the weekly collection of the waste and recyclables. The recycling stations all feature 3 bins. They're all labeled, one of which is for general waste and 2 are for recyclable materials. Each of those bins has a 40-gallon capacity for a total unit capacity of 120 gallons of waste. So it's going to keep a lot of waste off of our streets. Also on our units is an advertising panel, and it is the advertising that is the funding mechanism for this program. The advertising featured on our units is reserved exclusively for local small businesses. So this is going to be a great opportunity for our local businesses to get their message out, increase their public visibility, without having to compete with big business or large retailers. Additionally, this is a revenue generating program. So the city will receive a percentage of the monthly advertising revenue that we can fold back into our Vacaville recycling program to help support our ongoing recycling activities. And then we'll also receive a portion of the unsold advertising space so that we could place our own message on there. Again, this helps to boost our recycling activities, all at no cost. So with that, I'll pass it right back over to Brian and he'll take us home.
The fiscal impact, pretty simple. I think this, hopefully you'll see it the same way, as a win-win. Adoption of the policy and approval of the agreement with Creative Outdoor Advertising has the potential to marginally increase revenues to the city's recycling program. And in my mind, that's an essential component of bringing that stability and sustainability to the program so that we can continue to do the promotions that Cal Recyclers are requiring in terms of outreaching and discussing public recycling or recycling and sustainability of the environment. There will be no fiscal impact to the city's general fund as a result of this action. And the recommendation by simple motion to adopt the subject resolution. that completes our presentation. Be happy to answer any questions.
I do have a few comments, but I wanted to start off by saying, just appreciate you guys getting out there ahead of it, finding some revenue sources. We always appreciate that, so thank you very much. I don't know exactly whose button this is, but I will. Councilmember Sullivan. No, Vice Mayor Harris. I apologize. I don't know the.
That's all right.
You're good.
So you don't indicate how many of these bins will be located throughout the city and what kind of opportunities there are? I mean, are we talking one or two downtown? Are we talking throughout the city? What is the plan and how will that look?
Good question. So the city, as Samantha said, we have sole discretion as to where they go. We expect creative outdoor advertising to come to us with a list. Now, we've already defined within the agreement very strict parameters as to where they could go, not to impede the sidewalks, et cetera. I suspect the greatest majority of them will actually land right next, as that photo demonstrated. Go back. Michelle, if you go back one more. One more. Okay. Apologies. I suspect that they'll land next to our transit bus shelters. That's where the bus shelter usually is located, where we've got a wide sidewalk. We've got people that are coming and going from that kind of activity. It is, I think, in looking at some of the other municipalities and where these elements can be seen, that's substantially where we would start them off at. And then from our standpoint, we want to walk slowly into this. So we drive it. We tell them how many and where, giving approval to those locations. And we develop a sense for how's this program going to work out before we dive into hundreds of them.
So I think that transit locations make sense, but when I think in terms of the recycling bins and that there's 3 of them, I think of, yard waste too. Is that part of it, or is it just recyclable cans and bottles and then your landfill stuff?
The units are configurable. So we've chosen to dedicate 1 to general waste, and then we have 2 for recyclables. And so usually that would be aluminum and bottles in one and paper products in another, whatever kind of makes sense for that area.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Couple of questions and a couple comments. The first comment, I guess, is could we add vaping to the exclusion for the tobacco, cannabis, alcohol? Because vaping technically can be considered none of the above, and there's some tricky loopholes with advertisers right now doing some sneaky stuff with vaping, if that's possible. Second is, so I've noticed the bus station advertisements all over town, and there's quite a few that have ads in there, and there's quite a few that have like the dog in the suit that everyone probably knows, which I think is the advertising company, right, that's trying to...
Lamar.
Could we do like a default, like if there is no advertising to go in there, could it be like a local art group or maybe a local school? Or could we advertise with local nonprofits a little better? I love the dog, he's cute, but he's all over the place. And it'd be cool to use those for something a little more community oriented. So I'd love to see if we could actually have a program where if they have unfilled slots, they give those first slots to local nonprofits, local artists, local whoever. It'd be really cool. And same concept with the recycling bins. Again, I don't want to see the dog everywhere on the recycling bins or whatever it is. But
Sure.
It's a cute dog, but we could use some more local art.
Totally understandable.
The second piece was, I think there is some, and I know you want to start small, and I think that's a great idea because we don't want these things all over town, but placement in parks or in front of parks, I think could be strategically advantageous in certain situations. I know, for example, I live right by Southwood Park, and there's always a ton of, I guarantee you there's probably 3 plastic bottles in the street in front of the park right now. So one of those in front of the park would be great, but then you go to Andrews Park, sometimes you've got people in the picnic area, and I guarantee you there's probably 3 soda cans in that area now that our staff will have to pick up tomorrow. So strategically placing those in those areas I think is great, but the other piece of that is maybe we could work with the schools and actually do educational advertisements on recycling and the importance of it and kind of encouraging kids to do that. It'd be kind of a cool opportunity if possible. And my last comment is, in a lot of places, inevitably they'll probably get vandalized or they'll have graffiti. We don't want to look at that eyesore for weeks and weeks and weeks. What is the uptime to fix that, repair that, change that out? Is that in the advertising contract somewhere as well?
It is. There's a maintenance component of the advertising agreement, and I believe it's within 48 hours of
Great.
notice. When I looked at it from the maintenance perspective, was a lot, we made it a lot more Vacaville centric.
Awesome.
Than what it initially started out. So those pieces of the puzzle have been well defined.
Awesome idea. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Councilmember Beatty.
Thank you very much. All the same questions. I had all the
Oh,
same.
you're good? Oh, well, that's amazing. I will open it up to the floor.
Raleigh Galligan, I don't have a lot of thought, I just heard about it, but, you know, whether it's effective or not, I don't know, but it will cut into the homeless income. And so, you know, whether that creates a vacuum for them to look for other ways to meet their needs, that could cost the city some money, just a thought.
Thank you. Seeing no other, I'll entertain motion.
I'll move it. Second.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. 9C, Mr. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This is a resolution approving a memorandum of understanding between the city of Vacaville and Local 39. We have Administrative Services Director Donlene Nardini and Jessica Bowes and Ken Matsumiya presenting.
You are.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. The first item is the Local 39 Operating Engineers Agreement. This is the operating engineers located in our utilities and public works departments. It's about 100 employees. The goal throughout this process has been sustainability of our OPEB and pension costs while balancing that with recruitment and retention needs to have the best employees we can. Some unique and additional challenges with this group in particular is that we've had an increase in resignations and a decrease in qualified candidates applying for our jobs, which means that we have more vacancies. These are critical positions throughout the city, and it's a competitive market, both public and private sector, which we don't normally see the private sector side of it as much, but with this group, the construction trades really do impede our ability to recruit. So we're addressing that through targeted equity adjustments where we've identified those needs. The term for this successor MOU is November 1, 2019 through October 31, 2021. The current term expires October 31st, 2019. For wages, there's a 2% COLA effective October 16th. And as a reminder, the current Bay Area urban cost of living adjustment is about 3.5%, and California statewide is above 3%. There's a 1% city contribution to the employee deferred compensation accounts effective November 1. This is a non-pensionable benefit to the employees. And then the equity adjustments that I mentioned, there's 16 classifications that will be impacted. And within those 16 classifications, it's 61 employees in this group. These are outlined in Exhibit A of your staff report. These equity adjustments range from 2.32% up to 11.06%, and they're all effective November 1st. Our maintenance worker field utilities positions are required to hold specialized certifications for their jobs, so they, along with that, get a 5% cert pay on top of their salary. This is for employees. There's also an increase in clothing allowance by $50 a year and a 2% COLA effective November 1 of 2020. Other changes are an increase in tuition reimbursement from $1,500 a year to $2,000, and this is on a fiscal year basis. We're also adding the ability to utilize these funds toward current student loan debt. There's one additional hour for callback or overtime when you're called back between midnight and 5 a.m. And the addition of bilingual pay at $100 a month when it's assigned by the department and the employee tests and passes a test for their bilingual skills. Also implementation of a 980 work schedule, which we've heard through exit interviews and surveying other agencies where people are leaving to. That has been something that we've seen consistently requested. The cost over the term is $414,600 to the general fund, about 970,000 split between our enterprise funds of sewer and water, 60/40 respectively, and about 207,000 split between our lighting and landscape districts and our central garage for those positions, for a total of a little under 1.6 million. Our recommendation is that by simple motion, you adopt the subject resolution. We'd also like to remind you of the process that takes place, that if it's approved tonight, an updated MOU document will be drafted based on the items that were in the staff report, and it will be reviewed by staff and the union. Once reviewed, the final MOU will be published to the city's website. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this item.
I have one question, Councilmember Sullivan.
First, I wanted to say thanks to Ken and Don. I had some questions last time. Ken spent about an hour with me, or maybe more yesterday, going through 5 years and multiple 5 years. So thank you. That was really helpful. Made me feel a lot better. Second question would be the Central Garage Fund. That's the first I'm hearing of that. Can you just give me a quick rundown on what that fund is and how that works?
You're okay.
Sure. So, in accounting terms, it's in what's called an internal service fund. And so internal service funds are used by the city for services that are pretty much used throughout. So we have one for garage, for our technology, a fuel station as well. And so all the garage services would be done through this internal service fund. That's where all the expenses sit. And then based off of usage, so if the police department has patrol cars that are being serviced, there's a cost that's allocated out to the departments that use it based off of the service provided.
Thank you. Second question, anecdotally, this particular bargaining unit, it's one of the units I do hear we have some real big issues with retention, like you mentioned, specifically in the water and kind of utility area. I've heard that East Bay Mud poaches folks and all kinds of stuff. You mentioned 16 got a pretty good equity adjustment. Do you think we've kind of solved those issues? Do we really kind of hit that? This is definitely one of those areas I do hear pretty frequently. Do you feel like we've addressed those issues pretty well with this contract?
Yes. So the last MOU that we had, we did some equities again based on recruitment and retention, and we have really struggled with this particular bargaining unit. And so I think in this contract, what we're bringing to you for approval is really kind of rounding out the remaining issues that we had from last time.
Good, thank you. And then lastly, I just want to say thanks again. I think this is the second meeting that we've actually had the MOUs on business with a presentation. I really appreciate it. I think the public does too. So thank you for your efforts and your time.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
I see no other questions. I'll open it up to the floor.
Thank you. I just want to say, I think this is a great contract. The equity adjustments were absolutely necessary. These are skill sets that can be done in the private. But I wanted to point out one particular thing that I saw on Exhibit A is that the bilingual pay has been $100 per month. And I think that's a model for you to consider. I know you're in the start of multi-year contracts. There's not going to be an opportunity to do anything for a number of years. But you ought to be given some thoughts about how you can move the other contracts into a monetary amount, and frankly, what you'd have to give up in order to do that. So, but I think it's an opportunity during the 3-year period. You have a cooling off period. You don't have any contracts for a while. But I think that model of $100 per month is a lot more sustainable than a model of a percentage, because every COLA you give, if you're giving 5% for an incentive, that 5% becomes a lot more valuable. So to the extent that you can get these incentives in line with a monetary, I think you'll be protecting the city for the future. But I really support the contract, and I think this is the first time I've seen bilingual pay at $100 a month as opposed to like 5% or 3%, because every COLA that you give, that just becomes an inflationary number. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else, I'll,
A simple motion.
oh, I have one more person, I'm sorry.
Alicia Minion, I have a question on process. So the raises for this employee group, I would have thought if they would have come out of entirely the enterprise fund, but I'm not familiar with every single position, so I don't know if some of those positions really should come out of the general fund. So what I was wondering, is it typical that raises for this particular employee group would come out of a portion general fund, the landscape and lighting district, and the central garage internal service fund, and water and sewer funds. I mean, I just want to know, was there anything unique in this particular, for this particular MOU to fund these raises? And can you tell me why part of it is general fund and part of it is enterprise fund?
Is that all you have?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sure, thank you for the question. So just to clarify, we don't kind of pick where these costs are going to be allocated, whether it's the general fund or the LNLs and enterprise. It's really based off of the positions. And so for the ones that are coded to the enterprise funds or sewer, which are the sewer and water funds, the reason that the costs are broken out that way is because the COLAs and the equities are related to positions, for positions that actually work in those functions. So they actually work in sewer, they actually work in water, and that's why that cost is allocated that way. For the LNL, so those are our park maintenance districts. The costs related to that are for the maintenance workers that are actually out there servicing the parks, and because that is the service they're providing, and that they are paid for out of those districts, that's why the cost is allocated that way. For the garage, as I mentioned previously, it's internal service fund. It's very similar to what other cities do because it's a centralized service that service pretty much all of our departments. It's put in an ISF fund. That answers the question.
Perfect, thank you. Did you want to speak?
Hello, I'm Wendy Brecken. I wanted to thank also the City Council for putting this on the regular business agenda. And I also want to thank staff for meeting with me for a couple hours, more than a couple hours. That was very nice. There was a lot of information given, and I have, so of course, a lot of questions, and I'll try to not ask them all tonight. But so one of the things I did want to point out is just a general process question, because I don't have an issue with this specific MOU, but as far as the resolution, they're talking about whereas local 39 MOU terms are described in Exhibit A. Well, the terms are not described in Exhibit A. You have some changed terms described in Exhibit A, but you don't have all the terms of the MOU described. So it maybe just say that the changed terms are described in Exhibit A, and then attach the MOU as an exhibit with all the terms. Because then you resolve, or if you approve this, you'll be resolving that the City Council approves the MOU. So the MOU is not yet written. The tentative agreement with these terms is what's written. So I'm not sure if you can approve of an MOU tonight. So that's my question. Also, another process question is, I did get a chance to look at some of the numbers you're given with the 5-year projection numbers and things like that. And they're very kind of high level, and as far as you cannot tell the specific breakout. You could tell that from the fiscal impact that there's a 1.5 million impact of the specific MOU, but you don't know how that's affected by the terms. Say somebody agreed with, the 7% raise for the electrician. So you don't know how much that is. How does that affect the total impact, in the next couple of years of the MOU? But more importantly, how do all these terms, either individually or together, affect the unfunded liability of the pension fund? How much more are they going to be? Is the city going to have to pay each year? And how does that affect the funding ratio? Because once the funding ratio is affected, as it has been going down with these salary increases going up, the funding ratio is going down, and that means that it costs more every year to fund the pensions, to pay for the pensions, which is, for us, as members of the public, we care because that means you can't maintain parks or whatever services that can't be done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're on.
Okay, so as far as the process goes, in terms of what we talked about this at the last council meeting. I mean, the authority that I have as a chief negotiator is all given to me by the council. And so what you see in terms of what you're approving tonight are terms that you've already authorized. And so that's essentially what it is, are the terms, the new terms, if you will, that you're authorizing. And then we are, of course, negotiating a successor MOU. So anything that we have not changed, that continues. That's typically how it works. So as far as process goes and us bringing you an entire MOU, that's not the process that we've followed in the past. It's typically been that the council has authorized the negotiations process. You then approve the terms, we implement, and we work with the union to flesh out the final details on the language. But the terms themselves, they don't change. It's what you would authorize tonight. And so then we go forward and we implement that. And then we post that to the website and distribute it internally to the bargaining units and so forth. So that's the process that we've followed. And unless, I'm directed to do something different, then that's typically what we are following in terms of process. With respect to the fiscal impact and projections, we'll have Ken answer a couple questions on that.
Sure, so I'll kind of go over like the unfunded liability. I think one of the questions was related to that and how that impacts, or the deal, how that impacts. So with pension, so PERS being the biggest example, what we pay to PERS every year, PERS does a valuation and they basically set rates for 3 years down the road. And so we recently got a valuation for 2018, and that valuation is what's used to basically fund the rates in 2021. And so what we pay to PERS, there's two components to it. There's something called the normal cost, and that's a percentage of payroll. And so if our wages go up by X percent, the normal cost percentage that PERS gives to us, that is basically rolled up, and we would have to, that percentage gets applied to the new salary that we would agree to. The UAL is the unfunded liability number that's given to us annually. That's a fixed amount that PERS gives to us. There's different things that affect the UAL. So it's not just COLAs and things of that nature. I mean, it's how long people live. It's kind of the merit increases that they get outside of wages. If we were just to look at COLA by itself, so the COLA in these deals, it's 2% a year. PERS assumes a COLA increase in their valuations as well. And the number that PERS has been using is from 2.75 to 3%. And so if PERS was right about every other assumption, and it was just the COLA that we were looking at, we would actually have an actual gain. Our liability would actually slightly go down because our COLA increases less than what PERS assumes. And so, but that isn't, the only thing that's looked at. There's a bunch of different things that fall into the UAL calculation, but if you're just going to compare the COLA and how that impacts the UAL, those are really the two things that you would look at.
Perfect, thank you. Seeing no other, I'm going to close comments from the floor. Entertain motion. You may.
So to address the concern about the language of the resolution and to be a little more clear on what we're actually doing, we could change the last action item to resolve that the city council authorizes the city manager to finalize the MOU incorporating the terms that you've approved.
Okay.
With that change, by simple motion, adopt the subject resolution.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Assistant City Manager, we'll move to 9D, please. Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I probably just killed it. You're
Thank
hot.
you.
There
Thank you,
go.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This next item is as I mentioned at the beginning of the agenda, we're presenting two separate resolutions now. One for the approval of an MOU with the Vacaville Police Managers Association, and a second resolution approving the MOU with our Vacaville Fire Managers Group. Our same group from finance is here to present that item to you.
Before we start, I would like to ask Mrs. City Attorney, are we going to hold these with two motions? A motion for one and a motion for the other? Is that how we're going to do it tonight?
I'd recommend doing it that way.
Okay,
You
perfect.
can
Thank you.
present the item as one, but
Okay, and then take two motions at one time? Is that fair? Or one motion, pass it, second? Okay, thank you.
So bear with me, I'm gonna cover both groups, the Police Managers Association and the Fire Managers Group. There are some similarities and there are some differences, so I'll try to indicate when I'm talking about just one group versus when I'm talking about both. The Vacaville Police Managers Group, sorry, am I doing that, Michelle? Sorry, I'm getting a little click happy here. The Vacaville Police Managers Association is made up of our sergeants, lieutenants, and captains in our police department, and it's 19 employees.
Questions?
Done. Good. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. Fire Managers Group is made up of our battalion chiefs and our deputy chief. It's 5 employees. So some background for both of the groups together. Both MOUs expired on June 30, 2018. So we've been having ongoing negotiations with both groups for about 21 months. The goal has been to establish a new tier of Retiree Medical. Our other safety groups, we established that tier earlier this year, and our non-safety groups, we established that 3rd tier last year in 2018. The result tonight with these 2 that we're talking about is establishment of the new tier and a successor MOU for both groups. So just talking about the police managers group here, the term for the police managers group is October 16th, 2019 through October 31st, 2021. So a little over 2 years. Wage increases for this group include a 3% COLA effective October 16th. And just a reminder, as we talked about in the last presentation, the Bay Area Urban COLA is currently 3.5%, California statewide a little over 3%. Another COLA of 2% effective November 1 of 2019, a 2% COLA effective November 1 of 2020, and then a one-time lump sum, $2,000 paid to all active employees. This is non-pensionable, one-time lump sum. Other items include a one-time city contribution to deferred compensation equivalent to 1% of the employee's base pay. This is again non-pensionable. An increase in admin leave cap, not an increase in the accrual, but an increase in the cap allowance of 100 hours to make it consistent with all the other groups across the city. Admin leave goes to our exempt employees that don't earn overtime. Shift differential for employees assigned to the graveyard shift in an amount of $250 flat monthly. And incident-driven extra compensation for our lieutenants in this group. Some other items are an increase in tuition reimbursement from $1,500 to $2,000 per fiscal year, again with the ability to utilize that towards current student loan debt. Some additional duties have been added to the qualifications for our leadership incentive plan, including Master Police Officer Program Oversight, Fleet Supervisor, and Public Information Officer. This allows employees to qualify for the leadership program as outlined in the leadership section of the MOU. There's a list of adjunct duties. This adds to that list. Each employee must spend a certain amount of time in any of these categories to be able to apply, along with education and length of service. Also, the adoption of the physical fitness plan. This is the same plan that the Vacaville Police Officers Association has adopted, and there's no additional compensation to the employees for this plan. Fire Managers Group, this is specific to them. The term is October 16th, 2019 through October 31, 2022, so a little over 3 years. Wages include a 3% and a 2% COLA that was implemented on August 1st of this year due to contractual compaction language that we have in this agreement. This language has existed since 2002, and it keeps a specified percentage differential between the captain and the battalion chief and the battalion chief and the deputy chief. So contractually, when we increased the pay for the Vacaville Firefighters Association, we had to do the same for this group at that same time. There's a 2% COLA effective November 1 of 2020, a 4% COLA effective November 1 of 2021, and a one-time lump sum of $2,000 paid to all active employees, again, non-pensionable. Other items include extra compensation for emergency callback. It includes the day shift employees being scheduled to work holidays. So before this, our day shift captain, our day shift battalion chief, and our deputy chief had holidays off. This will allow the department more flexibility in scheduling. Those employees will now be scheduled to work holidays. In lieu of that, they'll receive 96 hours of vacation and 3% of base pay in wages. This matches what our shift employees currently receive. And if an employee wants to take a holiday off, they'll have to use their vacation time. This increases the admin leave cap to 100 hours for the day shift and 300 for the 24-hour shift employees. Again, this is consistency for the cap, not for an increase in accrual. 120-hour lump sum vacation bonus for battalion chiefs that work a 24-hour shift and reach 15 years of service. This already existed for the non-shift employees when they reached 15 years of service, but it didn't exist for our 24-hour employees. So it kind of came down to what you were scheduled for. If you were scheduled to work days at that time and you happen to hit your 15 years, you would get it. If you were on shift, you wouldn't. Okay, so here we're going to talk about the Tier 3 Retiree Medical, and this will apply to both groups, identical for both groups. This is the Tier 3 Retiree Medical and other benefit changes that came along with that. So, just some background here. The city is not self-insured for health insurance. We contract through CalPERS for health insurance. They provide group health. This means that the city doesn't have input in negotiation of the rates or the plans that are available. It also takes a lot of legal issues off of the city for having to administer our own plans. CalPERS Health is regulated by the Public Employees Medical and Hospital Care Act, also referred to as PEMCA. And PEMCA dictates a minimum amount an employer can contribute. It's referred to as the PEMCA minimum. We'll talk more about PEMCA in our next agenda item. For more details on the Tier 3, I would refer you to Exhibits B and C. Basically, we established the new tier based on date of hire. So the new tier would be based on anyone hired into these groups on or after January 1 of 2020. It's a reduced benefit to ensure sustainability, and there's no change to current active employees or current retirees. So Tier 3 consists of a benefit while active. An employee hired into this Tier 3 would receive contributions into a retiree health savings account. Employee and employer contributions will be made. $50 would start at the completion of their initial probation with the city, and it goes up to $100 per month maximum at 10 years of city service. It is portable after 5 years of city service. So if they leave prior to the 5 years, they wouldn't take the city's contributions with them. They would only take the contributions they've made. Once retired, the Tier 3 employees would receive the PEMCA minimum, as we talked about earlier. Currently, that's $136 a month, plus an additional flat monthly contribution based on their total years of service here at the city of Vacaville. Again, our prior tiers allowed for additional time from prior agencies to count toward the retiree medical contribution. This will only count city of Vacaville time. It ranges from $100 at 10 to 15 years of service to up to a $200 maximum at 20 years. These are not portable, so an employee must retire from the city of Vacaville to receive these benefits, unlike the RHS. The RHS, along with these benefits, are flat amounts, which makes them easier to budget and forecast. Other benefit changes for both of these groups include an elimination of the health opt-out. We had a health waiver program where employees could opt out of health insurance and receive $250 a month. This eliminates that and grandfathers those employees in that currently receive it. No employees existing or future hires can opt into that benefit. Increasing the dental calendar year maximum from $1,500 to $2,500, increasing orthodontic lifetime maximum from $1,500 to $2,500, and adding adults to that benefit. Vision increase for lens and frame allowance from every 24 months to every 12 months. And then some other benefit changes. These are all, I'd like to just note, these are all employee elected. They're completely voluntary. If the employee does elect them, they pay for them. There's no city contribution to any of these benefits listed on this slide. Short-term disability, increasing the maximum benefit, increasing the duration, voluntary life insurance, increasing the amount an employee can purchase for themselves or their spouse, and offering AFLAC products that we haven't had before. Again, these are all all employee, voluntary, elected, and paid benefits. Cost over the term, $584,000 for the police managers over the 2-year term, and $354,500 for the fire managers over a 3-year term, for a total of $900,000. I almost made it all the way through. $938,700 total, and it's all general fund. So 2 actions will be needed tonight, as we talked about. By simple motion, adopt the VPMA resolution, and then by simple motion, adopt the fire manager's resolution. Again, a reminder of the process, as we talked about. If approved tonight, an updated MOU document will be prepared and reviewed by staff and the union. Once that's done, it will be published. And we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I would like to start off by saying that this is a huge step for the city of Vacaville. Negotiations aren't fun, and we took a huge benefit away from all of these bargaining groups, and I applaud them for it because we needed it. Unfunded liabilities looming, and we want to take the steps that we've been taking and further those steps, and this is a huge benefit for our unfunded liability now, and we've taken it away from these groups. I want to thank the police managers and the fire managers. Again, negotiations aren't fun by any means, and if I had the ability to, I would pay these people what they're worth, but unfortunately, with times right now, we are deficit spending, and we're trying to just get the people and our staff the amount of money we can at this point. And I know they're not happy, and I know that they negotiated to the best of their abilities, but I thank them for finally coming up with us and doing this for us. And with all the groups jumped forward and got this done, and I applaud you and your staff. This was very hard on the city council. It was a huge benefit, and we have year after year after year taken their money away over the last 11 years, and taking a benefit away from them and not having enough money to compensate that benefit. I just want to thank them and thank all the staff, and I look forward to better days ahead. So thank you. I see no other comments from council. I will open it up to the floor. Seeing no one from the floor, I'll entertain motion. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll open the floor up again.
Hi, I'm Wendy Brecken. So getting back to pensions, we currently have 84 retirees that make more than $100,000, and one retiree makes more than $220,000 per year. So that's more than the governor makes while working. The reason for some of these higher pensions is what's called pension spiking, which occurs with what the MOU calls premiums and what maybe other people term incentives. And so in these contracts, first of all, the current pension incentives in the MOU are done in percentages, and like a prior speaker said, if you're giving 10% for leadership pay, then every time that person gets a raise, they're getting much more than 10%. So it would be really good if we could just defer this contract and think about changing the incentive pay to dollar amount so that it doesn't keep astronomically increasing over the years. The statement about taking benefits away, yeah, it's true. This is taking the medical retiree benefit away from new employees, but all active employees will still have the 85% Kaiser rate. So nothing's being taken away from the active employees, and I fear that they've gotten increased wages because of things that'll be taken away from the new employees. Also, there have been raises even, I believe, during and after the recession that occurred with trigger pay is what I think the informal word for that is, which was in the MOUs. And in June of 2016, June of 2017, both those years added together, there was a 4% pay increase for all employees. If you look at the police and fire comparisons, the salary comparisons, OPEB, or the medical retiree benefit, the health benefit, was not included when comparing Vacaville's pay to all the other cities' pay. So can't really rely on something that says even, I think even, okay. So you can't rely on the salary comparisons because OPEB is a huge benefit, and it's.
I need you to wrap it up, please.
There's 2 agenda items, so I think I get 6 minutes.
I'm going to hold you to 3 minutes.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you. And I would like to comment, Wendy, I know that you've just been coming for the last year, but I've been sitting up here for 11. And when you say, oh, we gave these guys raises, I think it's unfair because we took all their money away. So we just restored some of their money back. That wasn't raises. I just want to clarify because it's irritating because everybody comes after our staff and they think, oh, it's just loads of money they're getting, and they're not, and they are sacrificing. So I just want to clarify, they didn't get raises. They just started getting some of their money back. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Weren't the concessions given back? The concession pay cuts, weren't they given back?
They weren't raises. They were just money given back from what we've taken away over all these years. Thank you. Anybody else?
So I sent you a spreadsheet that I received from CalPERS, and I had a list of the 470 retired employees and their pensions. And originally, the reason why I asked for that data was because the MOUs, again, like we've heard tonight, there are benefits, and some are presented in the form of percentage, but again, it's not quantified into a dollar. And I know and I've also mentioned in the last meeting, when you look at the fiscal impact, you see it for short term. You don't see long-term fiscal impact, so say the 5-year period or all the way through the impact on the overall pension. And so I think it's important, I gave you that spreadsheet because I think it's important to look at outcomes. So over the decades, you've approved various benefits, and it sounds like they've changed. Maybe something's gone away, some things came back, and then things increased or decreased. But I think what's important is that you understand the outcome. And the retirement pension is a good measurement because you say, okay, what did the employee what is their pension when they retire? It's reflective of what their compensation was during their career. Now, I'm not going to argue with you on whether it's the pensions they're receiving are high or low. Still investigating, and you have to compare to peers, and we have to actually recalculate the pension to understand what each component went into the number that formulated the pension. So it's not just the salary, there are these add-ons, as you know, and they equate to dollars, and those get added into the formula to understand the pension. So over the last couple of years, we hear comments. I understand that it's irritating to hear. It sounds like an attack, but it's not an attack. I viewed it as analysis, and going to come back with hard data, and we can meet with you one-on-one. But when I've taken a sample and I've looked at the timeline of when there was reductions and concessions and then increases, and the actual numbers don't coincide, don't tie out to the benefit, the language in the MOU. So I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion, and I apologize if it always seemed like an attack. It's not an attack. I view it as analysis and information. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Beatty?
Yes. Can I ask Ms. Minion a question?
You can.
Ms. Minion, Mrs. Minion, I'm sorry. Can I ask you a question? Because the
Can you
financial.
come back up to the podium, please?
It's just on the process. I want to help understand the process as well, because I think we all want to get as educated as possible on the decisions that we make and the long-term benefits. So when you talk about analysis, do you include in that analysis potential revenue sources for the same periods of time that you're considering expenses?
I think the first step you have to do is understand the compensation and then reconcile it back to what's been negotiated in writing.
Right, that gives you
And
one,
then-
that gives you one number. I'm asking for both numbers that are required to determine whether or not it's overcompensation, undercompensation.
So,
Revenue is a part of it.
so we're not there yet. We have to understand how it's calculated first, what factors and components are in the calculation, and then once you have an understanding what's happening here, then you can compare it.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
So-
and so it's still early.
Yeah, that
But
makes,
I,
that's the point I'm making. It's
Yeah.
still early and we're not there yet.
no, but it's just, I want you to understand that this is something I think it's worth delving into,
Absolutely.
because maybe there'll be something that comes out of it that's positive. And it really comes down to information for the public, because it's important to understand why Vacaville safety and miscellaneous groups
Right.
have funded ratios below 70%.
Right. and
Okay,
that-
which is important to
It's
know.
important, it's important to know, that, and the point
Yeah.
being, it's too early and we're not there yet. So that's a
Yeah.
process that we're working on to get there. Thank you
Correct.
very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Yes, I just wanted to make one point, and that is that when we talk about the PERS pension, and what we're talking about are the actuarial studies here, and when you want to compare one number and use one set of data, which is the salaries for the city of Vacaville, that's not going to be indicative of the true actuarial. When you heard staff earlier talk about all the factors that go into that study, that includes not just their salary, it includes the length of the lifespan of that employee. It includes those factors that weren't in the control of the city at all, which is like PERS smoothing the retirement system, or PERS not meeting their 7% goal for their number and then pushing that back down to the cities. So to put that all on, as the mayor said, all on the back of the employees and say it's because we're giving them too much money in a salary is not a fair assessment. We need to look at it from an overall and much more global perspective, and we can all fully understand what those changes are, but also realize that our employees need to make a livable wage so that they can live in our city with a 3% increase in pay versus a 3.5 increase in the cost of living in the area in which they live. Thank you.
I also wanted to comment and say that, we do many studies on the wages all around, that we pull it every year, every time we negotiate, which is basically every year. And the studies come back that we're right in line. And I feel like a lot of times people come up here, they're saying, oh, you know what, let's take more benefits away, let's take more wages away. But when we did a study on how people love Vacaville and what they love about Vacaville, it was always our staff, the hometown feel. And I think it's because of our staff that we have that hometown feel. And if you go ahead and we can negotiate all their benefits away and rip their wages down to lower than all the other communities around us, they're going to leave. And we're going to be left with a hollow staff, and it's not going to have that hometown feel. So we have to be competitive, and it's hard because we're deficit spending, and we're still trying to give these folks the best wages we can. As unfunded liability goes up, we strip stuff away from them. So it's frustrating because we want to do the best for them without losing them and retaining them. And then we have people that come out and just say, oh, they're overpaid, they're overcompensated, they have too much benefits. And what we do is we put a lot, or you guys, well, not us, you guys put a lot of time in to making sure that we are at least even with everyone else around us. And it's hard because a lot of the cities around us continue to throw that number out there, and, you know, we have to try to come into the middle, and that's all I have to say about that. So I apologize. I know you've been
That's
standing
okay,
up there
Mayor.
for a long time. Go ahead.
Appreciate that. And thank you for all your work. This is not an easy issue. This is not at all. I'm standing here, which brought me to this podium a couple of meetings ago, was the $327 million unfunded liability that we have, and it puts us in the lower 10% of all California cities. And we didn't get there overnight. There's no doubt about it. And all of you sitting here probably were not even involved when a lot of those agreements were made. But as a business consultant, and I've worked with over 1,000 businesses to help them become more profitable, a business can only afford to pay what they can afford to pay. And if we continue to pay what we can't afford to pay, then we are going to wind up like Vallejo or other cities that have had to go bankrupt. And I think that before any MOU moving forward is considered, that the pension, the fact on the bottom at the end, that pension, what we're going to be paying on the end coming out, is that going to be contributing to our deficit or adding to it? And that's one thing I think is missing from these. As good as all the work the staff is doing, I don't see those numbers there. What are the hard numbers of what this is going to do to our unfunded liability? Is this going to increase the $327 million deficit we have, or is it going to reduce that? And I shared, you know, and you can get a lot of different studies. I shared a 12-state study showing that our salaries were 47% higher than 12 similar cities with the same property values and the same population. And I also looked at the pensions we're now paying. The city's paying $26 million a year in pensions. And these are unsustainable. It's unsustainable for us to continue to pay $26 million a year. And yes, as a retired police lieutenant that's getting $217,000 a year as a pension, is that overpaid? You know, when I look at, I'm turning 70 next year, and I waited to 70 to get my $30,000 a year from Social Security, knowing that I also had to do other investing things because I was only a part of it. So I think we have to look at hard numbers here of what we can and cannot afford. And if we can't afford it, then be realistic, because just to say we want to pay the best, I mean, I love our firefighters, I love our police officers, a lot of them are personal friends, but what can we afford to pay? And right now, out of everything on this MOU, I don't see anything that's saying this is the bottom at the end, this is going to save us at the end point. What is going to save us? We said some takeaways, but when I read that screen, I'm saying about 9 out of 10 times I saw a line, the word increase was out of 9 to 10 lines, and it was only about 1 out of 10 lines that said decrease. And so how can we give all that until we assess exactly what's a dollar? I want to see a dollar amount. All of these things we're giving away now, what's it going to add to our $26 million annual pension? Thank you for your time and for your work on it.
Councilmember Beatty.
Now, so I'm sorry, I want to ask you, Chris, so I don't get too quick before you guys sit down.
Sure.
Because I'm getting financial certifications about this whole process, because, I'm new in this whole process. I do want to tell you, that I've been here a few months. Now, I do know that everyone in this room, including everyone up here, understands that the unfunded liability, the way it sits, is not manageable. We have to do something about it. But I don't think that's new information when you tell us this. We worry about it all the time. We meet about it all the time. And then we ask the employees, hey, we have this unmanageable set of circumstances, so we need you to help us. So everyone is aware of it, and employees have given their life insurance and their health insurance in this new tiered program. Sometimes it feels like it's all new information, and we're supposed to be shocked. It's not new information. We are really working on it every day. But in understanding financial concepts, I would ask you, in the 1,000 businesses that you have consulted, have you ever encouraged any of them to take a line of credit to build inventory or to build their business?
It depends on if they could afford the payments or not.
Right, but
It's all whether you can afford the debt.
Right.
If you can't afford the debt service, no.
that's right. So
If you can't
it
afford it.
depends on the set of circumstances,
Sure.
right? There's not one rule in the whole process.
There isn't.
Which is where we find ourselves with so many convoluted, as you've stated, long-term agreements from long ago that we're trying to unwind. You're seeing some of it tonight. We're unwinding things that people had for years to get to a simple model that we can actually use. So I think it is a process of, we're not there yet, but we're definitely taking steps to get there.
Right, but you're the first one that you voted on was the 2% annual COLA, which I think was a great one. When I look at this over two years and 3 months, there was an 11% raise you know, that, why weren't we looking at a 2%?
Yeah, that's another thing. I always get confused about, the way you guys add stuff all at one time. There's not one 11% raise. It's over,
It was over 2 years and 3 months.
right, we
But
have,
I'm saying 11% over 2 years, 3 months is a lot more than 2%
Yeah,
over 2 years for the maintenance crew that you just
well, it's a
approved.
different job.
I understood, but the cost of living increases is the same. If we're all living in Vacaville and we have the same cost of living increase, then everyone should be getting the same cost of living.
Everyone in town should be making the same money.
No,
Okay.
no, I'm just saying, whatever their base is, if the COLA is in one group is now 2% a year, why isn't another, COLA in another group 11% over 2 years and 3 months?
Yeah, it's a longer period of that, but again, it's over a period of time.
Correct.
The 2% was 1 year. The
Yeah.
11% you're making reference to is
Two years,
Two-
2 years, 3
three,
months.
it's 3 years.
So that would be 4% for the two-year contracts as
Right.
opposed to 11%
Yeah, completely different
for,
jobs.
for the safety.
Right,
and-
completely different jobs.
So I just have you look at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And was there a detail on the physical fitness plan, what that was? It says it's provided a physical fitness plan.
You can ask at the end of the meeting.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just make a quick comment.
Sure.
So regarding the forecast on the November 12th council meeting, we will be presenting pretty much the updated numbers through fiscal year 19 because we closed the books on that. And then as part of that, we would have an updated forecast. So some of these questions that are coming up related to what it does to the 5-year and the forecast, they would be addressed in that meeting. And then for the unfunded liability and like the COLAs and these equity adjustments that are being put in place, as I mentioned earlier, we're not going to know for sure what the impact of the unfunded liability will be until years down the road. I mean, so PERS, again, they rely on evaluation that's 3 years owed to set their rates for the upcoming year. I mean, that's the process. And so since we're in fiscal year 20, we wouldn't see the impact of the UAL as far as like what we're paying going forward for another 3 or 4 years after that. So it would be 2024, 2025 in that time period that we're actually seeing what the new UAL number would be. And it's not just going to be the COLA, it's going to be, again, like the demographic assumptions and things of that nature, whether the interest rate, the assumed interest rate of 7% is still accurate or if it's a different number. These are all going to be factored in, but we wouldn't really know the impact of the COLA adjustment to our UAL until 2024, 25.
But ultimately, when you're taking benefits away, that usually shrinks unfunded liability. That's why we're doing it. We're not doing it in hopes that it will shrink it. We're doing
Yeah,
it because it will shrink it.
I'm just talking about the
Okay.
pension side. Yep.
I have 2 more comments before I get to you, sir. Councilmember Sullivan.
A couple quick comments and a question or two. So I think I actually had some problems at the last meeting, kind of with very similar topics to what Mr. Wells was kind of pointing out. For me, it's really hard to follow the impact of where the contract is going to hit, in particular for me, the deficit. The OPEB piece is kind of like this elusive, magical number that we'll get to that later. But at least the deficit piece, and again, I had some questions and I had some comments at the last meeting. I had some comments during the firefighter contract again too. I think the statement I want to make is I think we're getting our process, it's getting better. And so even adding the MOUs to open sessions and discussing in public and actually answering questions and kind of dialing these things in is great. The hour that I got to spend with you last week was fantastic. It answered all of my questions. It actually made me very comfortable tonight. I'm not sure exactly what I'm asking for, but to Mr. Wells' point, it is kind of uncomfortable when we're deficit spending. There's the prospect that we breach our reserve policy in the next couple of years, and we're approving these multi-million-dollar contracts. It just feels a little disconnected. So the more we can move towards a process where we show the impact to the contract in more of a granular fashion, I think the better, and I think that would help some of the public as well as help myself. But again, that's kind of the trouble I've had the whole time, and on different governing bodies that I was on, the process was different, and there was some more time and some more detail in there. But I really appreciate the effort and appreciate how much movement we've made so far, and I think we're getting better and better and better, and I want to say thank you. The second piece, the question I have, the salary comps were brought up a couple times tonight by some folks on council and some folks in the public. Is the methodology we use for all the bargaining units the same, or is it a different comp for each negotiation? Is question one. And then question two is, are those comps ever made public after negotiations, or are those always closed session negotiated and confidential items?
So to answer your first question, we use a similar process for all of our bargaining units. What can differ is the agencies that we compare to. So for instance, this last round, we hired a consultant to do our total compensation study.
that consultant came in and gave us what they proposed be our agencies to compare to based on not only size, but regional factors and where we might lose people to. So it was a list of public agencies. It's all public agencies. And then we sat down with each bargaining unit to discuss those agencies and how, because if we don't have agreement with our bargaining units on what agencies we're gonna use, it's just gonna be difficult throughout the whole process.
Right.
So we feel like it's important to sit down and agree upon which agencies we're gonna use. So while the majority of the agencies stay the same across the board for all of our bargaining units, there are some cases where we pull a couple out and replace. So for instance, the Local 39 group that was approved tonight, we lose a lot of people to special districts. So we pulled some agencies out that weren't a good match and replaced them with a couple special districts.
Gotcha.
So, but otherwise, yes, it's similar across the board.
Okay, a quick add-on question to that. So like during my day job, we have a philosophy with several of the bargaining units where we try not to go under 2.5% under the average or the mean, and then not 2.5% over. Do we have a philosophy or like bumpers or guardrails? Do we have a target for, or does it vary by group? Does it vary by contract, or we not have that at all?
We don't have a compensation policy here, so
Okay.
it's based on a lot of factors. So we take total compensation and comparison data into account. We also look at our recruitment and retention internally, and then, budgetary issues, the direction of the council.
Okay, and then my last question that I asked earlier. So Transparent California has these crazy, crazy numbers. Do we ever share our comps so people can see what we're looking at versus kind of inflated numbers you can find online or numbers that may or may not be accurate? Do we share the comp information after negotiations publicly, or is that a confidential item that we don't share?
Once negotiations are finalized, we share the information.
Okay, thank you.
Requested.
Vice Mayor Harris.
Really just a couple of comments. One is that our unfunded liabilities, which we talk about every single council meeting, is really a moving target. And we have control only over portions of it, not the entire thing. So even for us sitting up here trying to make decisions, it's a bit frustrating. But again, we don't have control over how those actuarials are compiled and then delivered in the form of payments that we have to make to CalPERS. The other thing is the Retiree Medical. That is something that, granted, it's going to be many, many years down the road. There will be a savings eventually. It's not going to be immediate, but it will happen over time. Everything is bargained. So it's not like we can sit up here and say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, take it or leave it. That is not how the process works. So this entire, with all of our different bargaining units, it has been excruciatingly painful to try and get through the process in a way that still preserves relationships and still preserves that dignity and that quality of life that we want for Vacaville. And we do appreciate all of our employees, regardless of what their field is. What we don't want is we don't want an impasse. We don't want to be in a position where this city council and our bargaining groups are at a stalemate and cannot move forward without a mediator or someone else moving in to make those decisions for us. It is always better to work together to come to a decision that is mutually agreeable. So as difficult as it is and as challenging as it is to not know the total impact yet, that is how the process works in cities across this nation. It's how the process works in counties, and we are doing the best we possibly can to make decisions that really keep us at a level of service that makes us as special as we are. And we are. We're still pretty darn special. When you look at Vacaville and how we care for our residents and the quality of service that we provide, we are known for being a city that cares deeply about our residents and providing the absolute best for our residents. So as hard as it is, we're making the hard decisions.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready, sir.
Council, staff, Raleigh Galligan, I'm part of that Unfunded Liability Committee, Citizens Committee, and just to remind and review why we're here and why we're doing what we're doing is we got two purposes. One, we want to see our unfunded liability go down for our pensions and our health care, but that also that you would appoint an advisory oversight committee to assist the city. You know, we would like to mitigate all this communication. It can be done in committee, not here on a meeting night. And our concerns are this: we haven't seen any movement for an appointment for an advisory committee that the city wrote to the grand jury saying it would execute. It feels like the rhythm of delay, deny, defend. That's just what it feels like. And our issues are really simple. First, that the staff would go a little deeper in their reports for the resolutions of the MOUs and show all the data that would reassure us as the public how they're addressing the grand jury recommendation to have a plan to reduce our unfunded liability. And secondly, that you would appoint a fiscal oversight committee, that's what they called it, we would hope before the holidays. Otherwise, it's delay, deny, and defend. Our perspective is this: we value our first responders. We've always affirmed their service, beginning with the 9/11 rally. Maybe you were there when we were there at the old Nut Tree Ballpark after 9/11 on September 15, 2001. We are behind our first responders. We celebrate responsible hiring of police officers to be peacekeepers and to navigate, like we heard in the last session, Prop 47, 57, and the recent Ninth Circuit rulings. We celebrate fair and contextualized and comparable salary packages for firefighters, police, city staff, and managers to bless them for their service, yes, and their sacrifices. But we're showing, and we'll show next council meeting, that our first responders are paid well and are well taken care of in retirement. That's not our issue. On the other hand, according to the grand jury report, Vacaville's fiscal outlook isn't looking as good. And we don't want you to put off doing the hard thing. Yes, it's a hard thing that is needed to be done to reduce our unfunded liability. We want our city to get their financial affairs in order before a recession hits and we're forced to face the consequences that Vallejo faced. As according to the NPR interview, Cohen, when he interviewed Phil Batchelor, and he asked him what happens when the city declares bankruptcy. We don't want this. Batchelor said they experienced 15% unemployment. They experienced cuts in pay and benefits for city employees, 67% decrease in real estate values. We don't want that. Decrease in safety services. 3 out of 8 fire stations closed, 42% firefighters, and 47 cut police officers. Please, we're asking you to appoint an advisory committee that would deal with it.
Thank you. And I thought you were here last meeting, but we said that we were bringing it back in November. So you'll see it in November. With that, I'm going to close public comment from the floor, and I'll entertain motion. I need approval on the first. Okay. Do I have a second? The police managers. You want that clarified, or are we good? Okay. I got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. I'll take a motion for this second. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Mr. Assistant City Manager, we will move now to item 9E. And I'll buzz you in. There you go, sir.
Mr. Mayor, our negotiation team will now present to the council multiple resolutions related to the city's health benefit vesting schedule and the implementation of a retiree employee health benefit.
Hi again. So Retiree Medical, so with that last item, you approved the Tier 3 Retiree Medical. With this item, it's the implementation of the Tier 3. So that's the difference between the two and the reason we have a separate item. Some of the information you'll see in this presentation will be similar or the same as a couple of the slides in the last presentation. I will try to get through those rather quickly. So again, our health insurance is through CalPERS. The first part of this slide is the same as the information in the last item. The bottom bullet, the bottom bullet along with the current PEMCA minimum that's listed here is $136. That's new to this slide, so I just want to cover that quickly. PEMCA, the law that dictates the health insurance through CalPERS, also dictates that an employer must make the same contribution toward retirees and health premiums as it does for active employees. This is referred to as the equal contribution method. So as a reminder, all of our non-safety groups completed this same process in 2018. This is now completing that process for our safety groups. So this will include fire managers and police managers that we approve their MOUs tonight, but it also will include our Police Officers Association and our Vacaville Firefighters Association to create that Tier 3. So the process to do this is, first we have to rescind our vesting schedule resolutions that we adopted with CalPERS several years ago. PERS requires this step to be taken. There's 4 resolutions, one for each of those groups that we talked about. Then we reduce to the PEMCA minimum, another resolution that CalPERS requires. It lists all of our groups on one resolution, so there's only one. Then we adopt a Tier 1 new resolution, a Tier 2 resolution, and then we implement Tier 3. Again, as a reminder of what the Tier 3 looks like, it will establish the new tier based on date of hire. So it will be January 1, 2020, anyone that's hired into these safety groups on or after that date. Saw this slide earlier as well. While they're active, there will be a contribution made to an RHS account. Once retired, the benefit depends on how many years of service they've had along with the PEMCA minimum. So to summarize what we have now, we have 3 tiers of retiree medical, Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 that we adopted tonight and will implement now based on your approval of this agenda item. As a reminder, Tier 1 and Tier 2 will become closed plans, so no employees will be able to go into those plans. Nobody that we hire from here on out after January 1 of 2020 for the safety, and the implementation date of 12/1/18 for our non-safety groups. All laterals and new hires will be hired into the Tier 3. Retiree medical at this point will be the same for all of our groups citywide, safety and non-safety. To tie that in with our pension, we currently have 3 tiers of pension as well. On the safety side, you see the list here of the pension formulas, and on the right-hand side is the non-safety. Again, you'll see that Tier 1 is a closed plan. Tier 2 for our pensions are for our lateral employees that come in, and Tier 3 is our PEPRA new. So in 2013, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act was put in place. Anyone hired as a new member of CalPERS on or after that date is put into a mandatory formula that cannot be changed, can't be increased or decreased by the agencies. Anybody that's a classic employee, meaning they already have PERS membership, so they worked at another PERS agency or a reciprocal agency, can come in as a lateral. So you'll see here, if we hire a lateral in our safety or non-safety groups, they're in this Tier 2. A lot of agencies did not adopt a Tier 2, so we are seeing some difficulty in our recruitment efforts at the lateral level due to that Tier 2 that we did implement prior to PEPRA. And I would refer you to Exhibit D of the prior staff report, where you can see that the safety groups listed, the pension and the healthcare tiers listed on one sheet. So where we stand today with our Tier 3s is on Tier 3 pension. Since PEPRA was enacted, we've actually hired 218 employees into PEPRA. That's over 40% of our workforce. That will be, as we've talked about before and Ken has referred to, that will be what we'll see in our actuarial reports going forward. We are not in what's called a pooled plan with CalPERS. So we pay the same amount an employer and employee contributions for our PEPRA as we do our classic employees. Tier 3 retiree medical that was implemented December 1st of last year for our non-safety groups, we've already hired 29 employees into that tier 3. So our recommendation is by simple motion to adopt the subject resolutions, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Sullivan.
A quick question on the non-safety, the 12/1 date, 2018. Was that the date that all of the active contracts for those units that conceded last year ended? Or was that an arbitrary date that we picked for that tier?
It was a date that we picked at the point of our last contract. When we brought the contracts to you for approval last year, we needed time to implement the resolutions that we're bringing tonight. So we needed time to be able to follow the PERS required process to do so. So we picked a date that was in the future that allowed us for that time. So it wasn't the end date of a contract or the beginning date of a contract.
Okay, so we'll have differences in the tier start date for the employees that we approved recently versus the ones that we approved last year, correct?
All non-safety will be December 1st of 2018. All safety will be 1/1 of 2020.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other comments, I'll open it up to the public. Seeing none, close, entertain motion. I got a motion second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Unanimous. We'll move to item 9F. Mr. Assistant City Manager, and you're on.
Thank you, sir. The next item is an award of a construction contract for the 2019 Elmira Road Waterline Replacement Project. Our city engineer, Tim Burke, will be making the presentation.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayors, council members. Here to present the award of contract for the 2019 Elmira Road Waterline Project. So the project scope for this project is we are going to be installing approximately 2,500 feet of new 12-inch water line and about 300 feet of 8-inch water line. The new water lines will replace existing water lines that are in Elmira Road that have become a very big maintenance problem. It also eliminates a 6-inch water line along Peabody that has been kind of deemed a hazard due to its proximity to a high-pressure gas line. We'll also be connecting, reconnecting private or fire hydrants and bringing them up to city standards. So we had 16 bids on October 15th, 2019. They range from $1,042,562 to $1,580,000. The apparent low bidder is Bay Pacific Pipelines out of Novato. And that was 6.8% below the engineer's estimate of $1.1 million. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the project plans, special provisions, and working details. We recommend awarding the construction contract to Bay Pacific Pipelines of Novato, California, and then authorize the Director of Public Works to execute a contract in the amount of $1,042,562.50.
Thank you, sir. I see no questions. I'll open up the floor.
I just had a quick question. Is this going to come out of development impact fees? And if so, which bucket?
It is not coming out of development impact fees. It is coming out of water rehab funds from the utility fund.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I'm going to close public comment. Entertain motion.
Simple motion to adopt the subject.
I got a motion second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. 9G, Mr. Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is the approval of the Chamber of Commerce Annual Program of Work and Annual Progress Report by the City Council. A little bit of background. This is something that we have been doing on an annual basis because we have been in partnership with the Vacaville Chamber of Commerce since at least 1992. The Chamber of Commerce provides services that the city can't provide in terms of reaching out to businesses in the community to help promote local economic development services. We normally have this item earlier in the year, but as you know, we had some activity go on with negotiations with the Chamber, And so we are before you today. And in front of us tonight is Becky Craig, the President and CEO of the Chamber, who's going to give you the update of what they've been up to this year.
Thank you.
Good evening. I also have with me here some board members that I would like to recognize. We have the chairman of the board and directors, so I'm happy that they're here to be supportive of this presentation. I don't know where I'm pointing this, but we'll, oh, did you do that? You did. Nope. I did that? Okay. I have done this presentation now for 4 years, and the mission has been the same. We continually improve economic prosperity of the business community through leadership, education, and resources. We are, as background information, set up as a 501c6. We have been in existence since March of 1950. And our revenue sources are primarily membership with some fundraising to do some supplemental with that. And our current membership is right around 460 members. This is not large enough for everyone to read. It's on our website and it's also available in a lot of our publications, but I did want to recognize that we are a self-governing board amongst our membership, and it is diverse. It represents not only our large businesses who make major investments into the business community, but also our small businesses. And whether they are single or have a few employees, as well as their demographics. So we are very happy to have such a diverse board and an engaged board. And then recognizing our small staff along with it. I recognize our programs in a variety of categories. With business resources, we are providing directories, online, referrals. So we are trying to get our businesses out there, marketed, promoted, but we're also developing workforce. We work with our partnerships with the city, with workforce development, with the school districts, community college, to ensure that the workforce is getting developed for the current employers and for what they vision for their future. We do this through a leadership Vacaville program, Inspire Dreams Start Now, the Workforce Readiness Certification, and the CTE programs we support within the local school districts. I know the mayor was there today. We had Inspire Dreams Start Now for the 4th time. We served over 1,700 8th grade students from not only Vacaville Unified School Districts, but also charter schools, private schools, Dixon Unified, and Travis Unified. So it was an amazing day over there where we had over 40 businesses displaying and exploring careers with our youth. Our information center, we provide a local access to small business development center resources. That's a partnership with the Workforce Development Board. And we also do independent lead verifications for any new employers who are wanting to come to town. While they may be talking to the EDC and the city, they also want to talk to the community, and we provide that resource to provide that independent verification. We also developed last year an independent website called vacaworks.com where any local employers can post jobs that are available to local employees. We are also having a job fair tomorrow at the Ulatis Community Center where we have approximately 30 businesses going to set up to recruit, and we will have hundreds of local residents coming through to seek potential jobs. In addition to that, we also focus on business issues, whether or not they're government and permitting or regulation. We also had the state update from Dan Walters last year, or actually this year in January, that was quite interesting because we had a new governor come in. So he told us how the activity in Sacramento was expected to change. We have the STA coming in to present next week on the I-80 Express Lanes project to extend through Vacaville, which will be super exciting. We also sit on the city's Economic Development Advisory Committee. We conduct business walks in partnership with the city and our local partners, and we are definitely advocates for the best uses for investment into our community and provide ombudsman services as available. We do a lot of community involvement with our business community. We are the liaison for the Travis Regional Armed Forces Committee. Travis Air Force Base is the #1 employer in the county, and we want to maintain that healthy relationship and show support to maintain that. Our young professionals of Vacaville, they're wrapping up their 2nd year. They are a very active group of 20 and 30-somethings that hold monthly activities. Anyone who's interested is welcome to join them. They just had a very exciting Halloween party, and they have a couple of other events for the rest of this year. Entrepreneurs Roundtable, this again is a partnership with the city and
the SBDC, to engage entrepreneurs, to help them develop and to get the resources that are unique to them. We promote our nonprofit organizations within the community. We have over 40 nonprofits that are members of the chamber who want to be promoted and to connect with our business community. We also coordinate with downtown Vacaville, Visit Vacaville, and are active at Fiesta Days and Merriment on Main. Networking events, this is what a lot of small businesses seek. They want the opportunity to network with each other, to do business to business, or just to build those relationships. All of those events are open to the community. Nothing that we do is chamber member oriented. It is open to all businesses regardless of membership. We encourage membership to show support for those programs through funding, but again, they're all on our calendar and they're all open. We like to do ribbon cuttings and celebrations. We have a ribbon cutting this week. We have 2 next Tuesday. So if you're looking to celebrate with our local businesses, either their anniversaries or their grand opening celebrations, please check out a calendar or give me a call and I can definitely let you know what's coming up. In addition to those, we have monthly wake-ups, lunch breaks, and after-hours mixers to provide additional opportunities for business leaders to mingle with each other. Above and beyond that, we have 3 special events of the year. We are introducing a new one in January. This one's exciting because we are going to help our small businesses recognize their star employees. We know that many of our employers are very appreciative of their employees, but they don't take that time to either do that recognition or they aren't able to do it on a grander scale. So we are going to have an event where all local employers can recognize that star employee and come to lunch, and we will have them walk the red carpet and take photos and give them a gift to thank them with that and be in a program. So they get that recognition not only in their small company, but amongst each other across the community. So we hope to have hundreds of employees there with their employees that we can celebrate that on a big scale. We'll also have a catered lunch, a motivational speaker, and then above and beyond that, the chamber is going to pick a Vacaville Employee of the Year amongst all those nominees and award that at that lunch also. So that's an exciting event that's going to be in January, and we're taking nominations now. The Movers and Shakers Breakfast Summit, I believe all of you attended that last year. That it was our first year for our revamp of the State of the City, and it was resoundingly successful. I think everybody there intends to be there again next year, and we hope that there's many more, and we hope to sell it out to the point that we might have to find a bigger place. But right now, it will be again at the Opera House, and we are looking forward to that on February 26th. So please have it on your calendars, and the community again is invited to come and hear not only our local public agencies talk about what has been going on and what the accomplishments are and the issues of the day, but to hear the business community engage at that time. And then each year in June, we have our Night of Champions, which is our annual awards and installation banquet, our year-end celebration. A recap, our calendar, Inspire was today, Job Fair is tomorrow. We are currently enrolling for our 14th year of Leadership Vacaville, a very strong program where we develop the community leaders of the future amongst our current business, and the Employee of the Year banquet, Movers and Shakers, and the Night of Champions. And we are settling into our new office at 411 Davis Street, Suite 101. We like it. So thank you so much for helping us with that negotiation of the contract and the funding agreement. We are going to have an open house next Wednesday on October 30th. So if you can come by in the afternoon and check it out, we would like to show it off, and we are open for business.
That's
And
great.
thank you. Is there anything that you're interested in knowing more about, or seeing if it's something that we have discussed or something that we should be considering as programs that we offer in our business community?
I'll start off with Councilmember Sullivan.
Okay.
So I wanted to make a comment, and then I have a question along the same lines. So the first comment I wanted to make is I really noticed over the last year, maybe 2 or 3, you've kind of like modernized this kind of new flair of the chamber. So you've got VacaWorks, you've got YPB, you've got all these new kind of events. Social media is like, there's always something great. The email blasts are great. So I really like how, I've noticed your approach, and I appreciate it. And I think it's actually a really cool kind of modern, new age kind of way to engage a group of folks that maybe traditionally didn't get engaged. Okay. So kudos, because it's noticeable. The second question is, we are sort of in the process right now of doing some strategic planning with the council itself, and we're kind of talking about what are our goals and what do we want for the city of Vacaville and kind of where do we want to go. I don't know if this question's for you or for Chair Barney or for Vice Chair Bates. I know we've got a few minutes here, but what would you summarize Vacaville is getting right now with local businesses, and where are the areas that as a council you would recommend maybe we pay more attention to?
What we're getting right is to continue to show that we are listening to them. They need to be heard, whether it's the business walk, whether the forums that we host, the opportunities to continually engage with each other and with the representatives is key. They want to be heard. They need to be heard. What we could do more, less regulation. So that is always what we hear, whether it's at the state level or the local level. We are actively engaged with the EDAC, as it's called, the Economic Development Advisory Council. We are interested in seeing the revisions and updates and adoption of new development impact fees and the zoning code update. So those we feel would be at the local level, something that would be of value to this process of community development. And so that we continue to stay interested in those, and then at the state level, just wipe it out. So start over.
We'll try.
Right.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I don't see any other comments. I just want to thank you and your staff. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I don't know if I'm more excited or you're more excited that you guys are in the new building, but I think it's a long time coming, and I just thank you for all you do for Vacaville.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
So seeing no other comments, I'm going to open up the floor if anybody has comments from the floor. I see none. I'm going to close it. Entertain motion.
Approved Chamber of Commerce Program of Work and Annual Progress Report.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. We'll move now to item 10, reports of city manager or assistant city manager. Do you have anything? You have none? Okay, perfect. Reports of city council. Anybody from the city council? Is this you, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah.
Councilmember Sullivan.
So I have three questions. My first question is, do we have any update on Brown Street? There was an article that felt a little kind of pre-authored in the Daily Republic today. Do you have any information on that project at all officially from the county?
No, while we continue to work with the county on possible solutions, we have not received any update as of this date.
My second question, and I was going to ask this question on the consent calendar on item A. I don't know about you guys, but probably like 40% of the emails I get or complaints I get are typically about a speeding issue or a safety issue by a school or something to do with a speed limit, stop sign, traffic light, something, et cetera, and I never really know what to do with those. So I kind of fire it off to Jeremy. It goes off to the traffic wizards, and I get some sort of random answer, and I try to explain that to the citizen who asks kind of what happened. I would really like it if we could actually have the traffic engineer, maybe some folks from PD, come in and really explain what the public can do if they're noticing, especially if they have concerns by schools, or I know I've got a couple neighbors that really want a stoplight at Southwood Drive. The staff gave me an excellent explanation as to why that can't happen, but it's really hard for me to explain that to him. And so it just seems like I constantly get these questions. It's either speeding or something traffic related. Could we maybe agendize a session where we talk about how citizens can voice those concerns, what the process is, and kind of maybe the cost and kind of variables associated with that process, if that makes sense? I don't know if anybody else is interested in that or not, but.
Oh, we'll discuss it at a later time.
Okay, thank you. And then my third question, and I haven't gotten any feedback the last couple of meetings, so I'm guessing folks might not be interested, but the Homeless Roundtable has asked for the city to locate space for a rotating winter shelter. Currently, we don't have a shelter option for folks other than we do have some beds and a few things, but in mass, we don't have that option. A, has the city made any progress on that? And B, I don't know if any of my other council members would like us to pursue that a little harder, or Aaron, do you have any news on that at all?
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
So
sir.
we've taken a preliminary look at it, and unfortunately, right now, there's just not a lot of available space out there.
Okay, thank you.
Nor money. Okay, any other comments from the council? Seeing none, I'll move to item 12A, payment of claims. I'll take motion.
Move approved.
I got a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. We'll move to 13, closed session. Will we be reporting out anything tonight possibly, or are we?
No, I don't believe any of the items will require.
Okay, good night, Vacaville.